Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Mentor Asia Pacific. I'm Alvin Sanga, and here we are at UOG at the moment. We're going to be interviewing Norman.
I handle Development and Alumni Affairs, and development is typically what we focus on with regard to fundraising, and the Alumni Affairs part is where we try to keep the lines of communication open between the institution and our alumni.
Okay, wow, that's a pretty big office to handle all of the alumni for UOG. Okay, so let's kind of get into kind of where we start with the show is share one thing that most people might not know about you.
Well, I really feel like people know a lot about me. I feel like my life is an open book. But it surprises me a lot of times that people don't know some of the basic things that I think a lot of people would know about me. So for example, I'm married, I have 2 kids. I started out really young. I got married when I was about 22 years old, and I've been married for well over 21 years, I think, at this point. And so I guess that's something that comes as a surprise to a lot of people. Other things, I guess, would be that I'm just constantly changing things. Frankly, my interests are quite varied. There may be a season where I might be really interested in food or fashion or self-help books or reading up on health and fitness. So it really depends. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is, depending upon when you meet me, there will be certain things that you may not know was a part of my immediate past and what I might actually be interested in the future.
Okay, so that means there's always an evolution that's happening.
Absolutely.
It's always changing. Okay, so that's kind of a good way to start your story. So let's talk about all these different evolutions and kind of how you ended up at this one office at the moment.
Sure. I was born and raised in Guam. So I went through public school all throughout my elementary, middle, and high school. I went to Harry S. Truman Elementary, and then PD Middle School is what it was called at the time. I think now it's Jose Rios, right? And then I graduated from high school at Ocean View. And of course, now that's a middle school, and the folks that were attending high school in Agate moved on to Southern High. And then shortly after graduation from high school, I went to the University of Guam, where I earned my undergraduate degree in communications and my master's degree in public administration. But during that time, I had also been focused on trying to get into the workforce as early as possible. And so while I was attending classes at the university, I was also managing part-time jobs. One of my first jobs was working at Geno's, which, as you know, is still around today. But that location was at the Ganya Shopping Center, where I think Cha Time is right now. So back in the old complex, that location, that's when I first got my interest in fashion kind of sparked, was working at Geno's. And then throughout, I guess the years after that, I actually went on and tried to become a reporter. So while I was pursuing my degree in communications, I went through an internship program at Cable News. And a lot of folks may not know what Cable News is today, but back in the day, it was one of the premier news organizations, kind of in competition with KUAM because they were both in broadcast news. So I started out at Cable News as an intern. I did a little bit of sports reporting, and I eventually ended up on the anchor desk after a couple of years. I did that for a little bit, and then I ventured into marketing. And my first marketing position outside of journalism was at a bank called HSBC. And we know today that HSBC is not around, but back then it was a really big bank, and I handled marketing, and I worked from the very bottom onto other marketing positions where the responsibilities increased and the workload, of course, increased with the level of responsibility. So after HSBC, I moved on to Guam Cell Communications, which, as you kind of know, is Docomo today, right? After Guam Cell, I moved on to Glimpses Advertising, and I did a little bit of work with a publication called Marine Drive Magazine, which ended up I think MDM was the name it had before it actually before they stopped producing copies. And then I moved on to PriceSmart. PriceSmart was located at the current Revenue and Taxation building in Barrigada. I did marketing there. And then I finally settled into a job at Triple J Enterprises, and I was a marketing director for about 10 years. So I had to gain experience along the way, and eventually I landed the job that I felt was, something that I really enjoyed doing, and I put 10 years of my life into that organization, and it was such a rewarding experience. I enjoyed working with the people there and all the experience that I gained, but I also felt it was time for me to move on. And so there was a position that opened up at the University of Guam, and that was the current position that I have now, which is Director for Development and Alumni Affairs. So I've been here for about 8 years, and it's been such an enjoyable experience.
Oh wow, that was a lot. So Geno's all the way to UOG. That's a lot of different hats that you've worn. But I kind of want to touch up on one thing is why do you think, why did you feel that it was important to be going to school and working at the same time?
Well, since an early age, it was very important for me to pursue higher education. It was always emphasized to me since I was a young kid. My parents, they didn't have the opportunities that I had growing up, and they really wanted to make sure that I saw education as a tool to pull myself into a better direction in terms of having the capacity to, earn more money, because at the end of the day, it's also about practicality. And so they didn't have that opportunity. They thought that they should impart that value onto me. So since a very young age, it was always make sure you do your homework, make sure you study hard, make sure you do your best, and that would enable you to have stronger chances to land a better job, a higher paying job. And that's pretty much what really emphasized, that's what made me really think about how important education was. But I also, at the same time had to make sure that I could also earn money along the way while studying, to pay for gas, to buy clothes, all the different expenses. I didn't want to have to rely on my parents. But what I'm trying to get at was, I knew from an early age that it was important to juggle both. There was no way that I was not going to focus on my studies, and there was no way that I was going to be able to survive without working. So I just had to find a way to manage both at the same time.
Okay, so juggling both, did that also kind of, picking out those jobs that did you have to negotiate your schedule or anything, putting those forward, did you have to tell them up front, I'm also going to school? How did you navigate those, especially jumping?
Well, I was very fortunate that I was working for organizations that were flexible enough to accommodate my school schedules. And I have to say, there was never any instance where I had to work for an organization where they said you have to prioritize work, even though they really could have said that. So I was very fortunate that they were able to work with the schedule that I was given, to schedule classes and all that good stuff. So that wasn't an issue for me.
Okay, so you took a couple different marketing jobs. You did a lot of I guess on the sales side of things.
Yeah.
How important is that skill to translate now, especially for students that are trying to get into the workforce?
Well, I definitely think that having the ability to sell products and to communicate to people what the benefits are of certain products and even services is a skill that everyone needs. It doesn't matter if you're going to pursue a career that's 100% focused on sales. Even selling ideas to your colleagues, even selling ideas to your kids to influence them to do certain things. Selling is a very important skill that I think sometimes people attach negative connotations to it because they imagine, a sleazy salesman selling something to somebody that they don't need. But what it really boils down to is having the ability to communicate effectively to another person so that they understand what the strengths and opportunities are for certain things. And that's where a person has to look at their moral compass to ensure that when they're communicating with people, they're actually influencing them in a way that is going to benefit the other person and even derive some benefit for the person themselves, right? So in other words, if I'm going to talk to somebody about a certain product, I want to make sure that they understand how it can help them. But at the same time, let them know that there are going to be some drawbacks, and that's where I feel people have to really focus on integrity.
Okay, So we talked about kind of you and your story, jumping from all your different careers, different hats that you've worn, and you talked about your different evolutions of what you kind of find that you're into and around at the moment. And I've seen kind of your presence growing in the social media world at the moment, and two of those ventures are what at the moment?
So I have my brand page, which is Analista & Co., which is obviously named after me, right, the family name. And so this is a business that my wife and I started about a year ago, and it started off really as a hobby. You know, we've always been into fashion design to some extent, and we never really thought that we could take it to a different level until we worked on a really big fashion show with some A-list designers from the Philippines. And it was really through them that they gave us the confidence to try to figure out what we can produce on our own, and then we ended up branching out. Social media has been a heaven sent. You know, a lot of small businesses would not be able to thrive if it weren't for social media. Considering I have a marketing background, I knew that I could use social media in a way that could help gain exposure for my brand. And so that's something that I've worked on at least for the last year, and it's still a struggle. You know, I'm still struggling to get people to follow my page, but I've done different things that has enabled the brand to kind of move forward with gaining followers and being involved with different events and promotions and that good stuff. At the end of the day, I also believe that it's not about the number of followers you get, but the quality of followers, meaning these are folks that are truly interested in your product. It would be meaningless to get 100,000 followers, but let's just say only 100 people are really interested in buying it, right? So what about the rest of the followers? Is it that important to have that much exposure or to have the numbers? I would venture to say not always, right? So one of the ways that I've thought that I could increase my following on the brand page was to focus on a different passion of mine, which was food. Like, who doesn't love to eat, right? And I love to eat. So I decided to create Designer Eats Guam, the Designer Eats persona. Obviously, the designer part comes from my fashion design, and I'm obviously eating. And I thought that I would also create kind of a service for people who want to know where's a good place to go, what my opinion is of certain dishes. And granted, not everyone is going to like what I like, but what I'm doing is I'm just simply showing them, here is something that you might want to consider. I personally like it, you may or may not, but at least you kind of know a little bit more about it before you decide to spend your hard-earned dollar. And I found that actual channel has gain more traction than my brand page, but I'm able to cross-promote both, and that's what I do oftentimes. Is if I'm doing a food review and I'm wearing one of my shirts, it doesn't hurt to do a little plug. Likewise, if I'm promoting my shirt on my brand page, it doesn't hurt to say that, by the way, if you want food suggestions, check out this page. So it's not a groundbreaking idea. Other companies are doing it as well, and I figured, why not give it a shot? So that's pretty much what I've done. Yeah,
true. I believe in that cross-platform, kind of using both of them, leveraging both of your interests for your gain. But let's backtrack a little. How did you get kind of into the designer sense? How did you get into that fashion mindset?
Yeah, well, ever since I was in high school, when I started working at Geno's, I kind of started developing, preference for aesthetics. Like, those are the formative years where you're still trying to figure out, okay, who am I as a person? Am I a jock? Am I a nerd? Am I this? Am I that? And oftentimes, the clothes that you wear communicate that to the rest of the world. And that point, I was still trying to figure out, okay, am I a nerd? Am I a jock? Am I, I'm never going to be this at this point. This is where I'm kind of going towards. And I've always kind of been a creative person. So the clothes that I gravitated to at that point were very loud and bright. And not to mention the fact that in the 90s, right, which is when I was in high school, that kind of was the trend that you saw a lot. You saw a lot of neon colors, loud prints. When I was working at Geno's, that's pretty much all that I really saw. And it really stuck with me. And so fast forward to, sometime last year, all those influences over the past few decades started coming out when I decided, okay, I'm going to try to create my own shirts. And let's see what they look like. And let's see what the market does with it. How will people react to it? And I've gotten some positive feedback, but I also had some negative feedback as well. But in producing those shirts, those types of products, I knew I wasn't going to please everybody. And that's never been my goal. My goal has never been to please everybody, but my goal has been to create pieces that I personally like. And maybe there will be folks who like it as well.
Yeah, wow. No, I've enjoyed some of your pieces when I see them out there. I'm like, oh, pick one up sometime soon. And also it kind of speaks to, I like that how you said that you're not trying to serve everyone, because there's no way that's going to happen. If you kind of narrow down to your market, it makes it a lot easier to be palpable. And then for Designer Eats Guam, kind of where do you see that now? Like, are there more places that you're going to try to go eat at and then kind of go there?
Absolutely. The way I see Designer Eats right now is it's really a resource that I'm using to help consumers make buying decisions, but it's also a platform to help small businesses because their advertising resources are also limited, and what they really need is kind of like a third party to tell consumers about the products that they have. So I feel that benefits them as well. And like they always say, word of mouth advertising is probably the most powerful form of advertising. So when you have someone such as myself or any of the other folks that are interested in food and talking about it, you're more likely to believe them, right? And that's where I make sure that I always stay focused on my main mission, and I don't want anybody to think that my opinion can be bought. So in other words, if I really don't like something, I don't necessarily believe in posting a bad review of that restaurant. I just don't post it at all. So what you'll see on my blog are things that I personally love and will stand behind, because I want to also keep it positive. My role is not to take down businesses. My role is not to tear down people. My role is to promote positivity. But in the same token, I'm not gonna lie. If I don't like something, it's just not gonna land on my page.
Okay, so you're trying to not be a food critic per se. You're trying to be a promoter for other businesses.
Yeah. And I gotta be upfront with everybody. I'm not a food critic in the sense that I don't have the expertise to properly assess how dishes should be prepared. But I do have a decisive palate where I know what I like. And again, not everybody is gonna like what I like, but at least I'm gonna have an opinion about it. And that's all as much as I can do. When I talk about a dish, it may be a little bit salty to me, but I actually like salty. But for some other folks who don't like saltiness, they're not gonna like that dish. And so therefore, for me, all I'm simply doing is just to help get that product out there, help the business get that product exposure, and the consumers can decide what to do with it.
Okay. So, away from all these items that you're on your professional and your interest route, you're also involved in the community, a bigger part of the community, Filipino community of Guam, right? So let's go talk about the organization and what is that?
Sure. So the Filipino community of Guam has been around for well over 60 years, and I was president of the organization for 2 years. I ended my term on December 31st of last year. So for 2 years I was president. 2 years prior to that, I was the first vice president. The organization actually has 3 vice presidents. And it's been an amazing experience to work with other Filipino leaders. For me, I think what made me different was that I was the only person who was born on Guam to become president. All other presidents of the organization migrated to Guam in their adulthood. Apart from that, I was also the youngest elected president, and that was my early 40s when that happened. Oftentimes the presidents were always in their late 50s or 60s. So I think given the difference that my leadership represented to the group, I was able to bring in younger Filipinos into the activities of the association, but it also meant introducing a lot of the older Filipinos to a different mindset with regard to how we produce and execute events, and also how we get the word out there. We talked about social media a lot. I really felt that it was important for us to integrate the use of social media in the way that we disseminate information about our events. So we had a Facebook page, and we did whatever we could to also put it out in traditional media as well whenever we had our big independence balls or some sort of community outreach efforts.
You talk about younger Filipinos coming into the organization. Let's say we're a high school student or a college student. How do we get involved with the Filipino community as well?
You know, the doors are always open, and all it really is taking the initiative to contact the Filipino community of Guam through any of the officers. And if you go into the Facebook page, you'll see contact information there. You can send a direct message, or you can even call up our public relations officer, call up that person and express the interest. But you know, it's really a two-way street in the sense that while the door is always open, you also have to take the first step in walking in through that door. And once you walk through that door, you can decide for yourself whether or not the activities or the programs that the group is involved with at the time fall in line with what your personal interests are.
So now let's kind of give some advice to any budding entrepreneurs that are thinking about either starting up their business or following a passion down any rabbit hole that they might think about. What's one piece of advice that you might want to give someone that is thinking about pursuing a passion and also still trying to stay practical?
There are a lot of cliches that I can think of. But I will say, even though they are cliches, I see a lot of value in it. And there's a number of different things that I would say, but I'll focus on one that I think is the most relevant to me. But the few others that I would think about are, never give up on your dreams. Well, that's absolutely true. Work hard and, do whatever you can to keep chipping away towards your goal. There's no substitute for hard work. I truly believe that. But the one thing that I think nobody's really said to me that I sort of carry with me around a lot, and that is you just got to follow your gut instinct and do what you think is right. You got to be smart about that, of course, right? But for the most part, even when people tell you you're doing the wrong things or you're not going to succeed, if you feel that fire in your gut, if you really feel the conviction, you got to run with it, because people are always going to try to I get kind of fired up when I hear this, when I even talk about this. People will always try to trample on your dreams. And that's the harsh reality that I've kind of come across. I really think of myself as someone who is very trusting of people. And I've learned the hard way that in trying to pursue my passion of producing my own brand and my own clothing line, that while you may have a group of people that want to see you succeed, there will always be a group of people that want to see you fail. And nobody has ever really said that to me in explicit terms until I've experienced it for myself. So the advice that I would tell other people is, as long as you truly believe that what you're trying to do is a passion of yours and you're going to really use it to better yourself and better the people that you love, it doesn't matter what everybody else around you who may be naysayers, doesn't matter what they try to do to take you down. And at this point, I will admit I'm nowhere near where I want to be, but if I follow my own advice, I'm just going to keep chipping away. And it's these little victories that you have to experience to get that fuel constantly going. And sometimes the span between the different victories may be a month, or maybe months, or may even be a year, but that's where you just keep on persisting, because you never know, you may experience that big break. Yeah.
I totally agree. Chip away and whatever you might have to. All right, guys, we're going to thank Norman for being on the show today. Once again, that's been an episode for Mentor Asia Pacific. Stay tuned, guys, for the next one.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, guys, for tuning into Mentor Asia Pacific. Once again, I'm Alvin Sangha. Check out all our social media. That's going to be linked down below. Stay tuned. More mentors are to come. We're going to be releasing a mentor every week. And please leave a comment down below for any mentors that you'd like to be featured on the channel. Any business professional, entrepreneur, or
anybody that you believe is inspiring and can provide to be a mentor for the youth of Guam. Until next time, thank you very much. Sangha out.